Okay,
everyone, we're going to get started. Welcome, welcome. I'm going to close out. Both Professor Long and Professor Holton are here joining us, as well as some other distinguished guests. So I want to welcome everyone to our conference. We'll have, great to see everybody. Like every good conference, right? We have some snacks here. Sorry for those of you who aren't here with us in person. We also have, if you go to a conference, you often get swag if you present. And so after you present, you can choose your mystery swag from the desk that's over here. Okay. Swag, fancy swag for our presenters this evening. So we'll have two panels in our, we'll have both presenters present their papers, and then we'll have a Q&A if we need a little break. So the next set of presenters, of course, we understand if you're not able to stay for the entire both panels this evening. I hope that you are able to stay though. Our first panel is Bad Moms, the Politics of Motherhood. And our first presenter is Zophia. Yep. So, and then what you'll want to do is select share screen once you have your presentation open. Okay. So you can minimize it or, yep. Yeah.
You're probably going to have to email it to Dr. J. And
Are you trying to get out of someone else's email?
Yes.
Open a different browser. Use Firefox. Chrome like colonizes. And I have to be signed in to use Zoom. Oh, so
We'll use
use student account. Why can't you use student account?
Because that's my student account.
I don't know.
What if we did an incognito?
Try the incognito.
Do a Chrome incognito, whichever. Yeah, hit those three bars, I think, right below. Private incognito.
Thank you.
You know, when I'm in the advising office, when I'm doing something random, just saving the day. Outing myself, but 6 days.
Oh my goodness.
Sorry.
It's Fort Knox. This is valuable research that you're protecting.
Yes, so.
Okay. Don't forget to hit share screen on Zoom so that they're able to see your slides.
It's the big green one in the middle.
Yep. Okay. See my timer.
Hey, hi everyone. My name is Zophia Krause, and tonight I'm going to be presenting on dystopian motherhood as a warning, specifically through the novels Red Clocks, Our Missing Hearts, and Future Home of the Living God. So we have at this point come to understand that a utopian society cannot exist and doesn't, and we can prevent actual dystopia if we listen to the literary genre's warning itself. At the same time, feminist dystopian literature does reveal how much dystopia already exists in our society, especially regarding gender roles and the oppression of women. It brings this oppressive binary to readers' attention through representations of motherhood in particular. Now, the dystopian genre proposes alternate versions of the future and serves as a method of contemplation for readers to consider what aspects of fictional society leads them to that point. The evolution of dystopia has incorporated the element of motherhood, adding other methods of oppression to consider when engaging in the speculative genre. This modern political climate as well has encouraged the resurgence of aspects of fictional societies, most notably, arguably, Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale. All of these novels have been compared to her in relation. And just as a brief summary of the three novels that I'll be discussing today, Red Clocks by Lenny Zumas follows the lives of several different women facing the consequences of the recently enacted Personhood Amendment, granting constitutional rights to fertilize eggs at the moment of conception, making abortion illegal, amongst other laws. These women's lives are interwoven in one way or another. Ro struggles with her fertility journey. IVF is also illegal. And they are also preparing a bill called Every Child Needs Two, in which you cannot adopt a child unless you are married. Susan, also known as the wife, struggles with her identity as a mother. Maddie is a young teenage girl who is working, trying to get an abortion in this country. Our Missing Hearts follows a 12-year-old boy named Bird on his search to find his mother, who he grew up believing abandoned him and his father at a young age. He comes to find her past as a famous poet whose work has been used in activism, protesting the new strict American government in a world that has developed into one of extreme censorship and Asian hate. And finally, Future Home of the Living God by Lise Erdrich is set in a sci-fi-like setting where evolution has reversed, and the main protagonist, Cedar, narrates her experiences through journal entries to her unborn child. She travels to find her Ojibwe family and attempts to hide from the rapidly increasing control the government is placing on women and their bodies. The novels blend dystopian elements with reality and critique present-day political and social constructs by condemning patriarchal control of women's bodies, utilizing the speculative genre and its elements to provide readers with their potential views of the future. And this brings me to my thesis. Lise Erdrich's Future Home of the Living God, Lenny Zumas's Red Clocks, and Celestine's Our Missing Hearts each blur the lines between dystopia and reality and work as cautionary tales, utilizing this genre to critique present-day politics and societal structures that force gendered expectations of women. These novels are all published within the past 6 years and depict women's anxieties about the effect of motherhood and the effect motherhood has on identity and the fear of governmental regulation of their pregnancies. Collectively, they do forewarn the impact that contemporary issues will have on future generations of women if unaddressed in our present-day society. Now, Arga Gasu and Priyanka Tripathi discuss in their joint article an essence of postmodern truths analyzing motherhood in Red Clocks by Lenny Zumas. The idea of Western society elevating this idea of motherhood in young girls, making them grow up to believe that that's what being a woman almost solely entails, and they should be excited. And it's their job, it's what they're made for. And they kind of grow up naive to the fact what motherhood really is and the struggles that they will endure, and how you can be a person outside from raising a child. But Zumos, Erdrich, and Ing each present their protagonists in their struggles of self-discovery. Susan in Red Clocks is also referred to as the wife, and she's written essentially as a single mother. She has a husband who she leaves at the end. She at times resents her job as a stay-at-home mother. We have discussed in class kind of villainization of it all. She's villainized for her struggling to fully confine herself to this role, while also comparing herself to mothers around her who seem to fit the job more naturally. Zumos has this tendency to pit her female characters against each other. They are jealous. Ro struggles with Susan having children while she cannot, and Susan kind of resents Ro for her relationship with her husband. And this demonstrates the impossible standards mothers are expected to meet in society. Margaret from Our Missing Hearts is granted an identity outside of motherhood, but she is constantly overcome by her guilt for leaving her son. The novel shifts to Margaret's point of view about halfway through, where the reader can see her insecurities. And there is a quote that I found really important and beautifully worded on how consumed she is by her fears. That they settle on her with dark wings, then nearly suffocating her, all of her many mistakes of motherhood. Each and every time she brought pain to the one she most wanted to protect. The catalog of failures in her mind is endless, and each memory digs its talons into her, weighing her down, pinning her in place. And in this, she is losing, her fears of losing her sense of self during pregnancy were ultimately overcome by her fears of failing as a mother, affirming her original apprehension and draining her individuality, which she expressed so beautifully in her poetry originally. And she later hopes that her son will understand that she is only human and that she did do the best she could do in the state that they were in. Turning to Future Home of the Living God, the science fiction aspect presents Cedar as a biological tool that has the ability to continue bloodlines and essentially save humanity. And rather than appreciating the female body and the fact that it can create life, Erdrich uses the patriarchal control of the novel's universe to take away a woman's humanity completely. They are simply just a tool that they can use for their survival. So both Red Clocks and Future Home of the Living God were written as direct responses to the reality of contemporary American politics. Erdrich originally drafted Future Home after the signing of the Patriot Act and the Global Gag Rule in 2001-2002. And if you're unaware, the Patriot Act granted law enforcement more power and agency to gather information and weapons to prevent future terrorist attacks post 9/11. And the Global Gag Rule is a policy that the United States government has where it limits funding to international organizations that provide or even talk about abortion services. Essentially, if an organization abroad wants US funding for family planning and reproductive health programs, they're not allowed to perform or actively promote abortion as a method of family planning. Zumos stated in an interview, rewinding a little bit. So Erdrich actually finished her draft when President Trump reinstated the Global Gag Rule. Zumos began writing in 2010. This was inspired by her own fertility journey and kind of thinking, does she want to be a mother, or is that what she told herself as she grew up? Because that's what young girls are kind of meant to believe. You know, you grow up, you get married, you have kids. Is that something you really want? And in her research through in vitro fertilization, she kind of discovered the political debate surrounding the topic and was a bit appalled and inspired to write this novel. And her draft evolved during the 2016 election, where she made the decision to alter her setting to one eerily similar to our current society, calling it a paratopia. And this word uses the Greek preface for near to refer to the story taking place in a society next to or closely relating to our own. Originally, it was supposed to be simply set in the future, in a dystopian future, but she realized this is actually happening maybe next week. And since then, Roe v. Wade has been overturned. So the timing is uncanny. So next I wanted to discuss the ambiguous nature of the endings of dystopian fiction. This departure from conventional storytelling allows for a nuanced message that leaves room for ambiguity. Feminist speculative fiction often prioritizes the journey or the process over a definitive resolution. The emphasis on character growth, resistance, and exploration of alternative possibilities becomes more important than providing a neatly packaged ending. And the approach aligns with feminist principles that value an ongoing effort for change. This provides a space for readers to kind of sit with their thoughts and promote a hope and a warning. These events are taking place, but it doesn't mean that has to be the end of the world. There's time to change. We just have to act on it. It doesn't always have to be a negative thing. The emphasis is more important because it demonstrates that there is still time to save the world. So in these three novels specifically, Susan does end up leaving her husband, Maddie does get an abortion, and Roe must come to terms with the fact that she cannot have a child, and each is forced to face society's judgment on their situations. Abortion is illegal. Maddie can never open up to anyone about this without the risk of imprisonment. Susan is now a single mom trying to find her identity. In the book, it talks about how she doesn't have her own banking account. She was never taught to navigate these things by herself. So in Our Missing Hearts, Margaret's dying thoughts are of worry and hope that her son will understand that she is only human. As I said before, it completely overtakes her creative spirit, is her guilt for not being there for her son, where she is essentially forced to leave her family for their safety. Future Home of the Living God, Cedar does give birth to a healthy baby at the end, but she is kept in an institution to continue to reproduce. Her body is simply just a reproductive tool to continue the world's bloodline. And she does lose her humanity herself. And there does seem to be no hope there, but it is for the reader to contemplate the future of society. So dystopian narratives often provide a lens through which authors can critique and comment on current societal norms, structures, and expectations, particularly those related to motherhood. These direct correlations between the creation of these stories and contemporary politics open the discussion to reproductive rights and women's autonomy. The genre often explores the gendered expectations placed on women, both in traditional and speculative settings, and it serves as a warning against the potential consequences of reinforcing these rigid gender roles and expectations. So it has been particularly relevant these past few years in society. And scholarship has been revisiting these novels quite a bit. And so it is important to take these not just as a form of entertainment, but to sit with it and think about its connections to our life right now. And that is all I have for you today.
So again, we'll hold up questions. Something. Yes. Yeah. I'll invite you both to sit at the front for the Q&A.
Who's mine? Let's see. if you go to one of the Firefox and try one now. I do have my mail open, so if you are presenting in the next panel and you want to email your presentation to me, you can access it that way. You don't want to go through the login security.
I think I'm gonna have to do it the other way because it didn't work through the email. It did the one where you have to sign in through your teacher and student account, like it was doing before.
Oh, okay, it could be if you don't have it set so that anyone can view the link, then, yeah. So, yeah, use the incognito window then. So,
Fully X out of the incognito browser. Yeah, and then open a new one.
I apologize. Be technical.
We should all just do less screens again.
Or post them in a discussion board on Blackboard. So you just have to open up a Blackboard and then that's is my hack. I hate that. I hate two-step verification.
I need to go to the IT help desk and have them help me set up the duo where, cause like I get a text message every time and I have to type in code. Instead of just like hitting the button.
Thank goodness. Oh,
don't forget to, do share screen. Yep. Thank you.
good. Okay, everyone. So my name is Juliana, and for my presentation, I decided to talk about motherhood versus rights. So I wanted to first discuss the inspiration behind my topic. So throughout this entire semester, I've become particularly interested in this topic through all of our in-class discussions. I was immediately hooked when we read Red Clocks because it reminded me so much of The Handmaid's Tale, which is one of my favorite novels personally. And as well as when we read Severance, I felt a lot of connection towards it, especially being a woman, and all of the rights that are changing right in front of me as I go through my life. And so they were basically driving factors, which made me want to write about this struggle that we continue to see in the world. Yeah, I honestly just wanted to write and see what happens because I'm so passionate about it. And especially the female characters in each of this novel, where they struggle with balancing the idea of being a mother while still maintaining their basic human rights in a world where they're basically stripped away from them. So in thinking about that idea, I've presented a question to myself that I hopefully look to find an answer for as I continue to build my paper and finish it. So I pose a couple questions to everyone, as well as myself. What exactly is the struggle? How can I aim to spread awareness for it? And should motherhood and rights be intertwined? And is there really a need to keep fighting for something that just seems like is not going to change? So I wanted to discuss my attempts at hopefully finding a resolution to my own questions. So in my journey on this writing, I honestly, gonna be honest, I didn't know where to start. I was doing basic searches with Red Clocks because I knew from the beginning that this was going to be the central focus of my paper, just because of the plot and the multiple characters that are in this novel. And through my searches, I found an article that remains my focal point of my paper and is arguably the most important part of the research that I found. So author Sylvia Martinez Falquina discusses the idea of feminist dystopia and realism through Red Cross, as well as Future Home of Living God, another novel that I am using as the focus of my paper. And in this article, she discusses how both of these novels mirror the real world, and she discusses the implications in society that these novels have. And she goes on to talk about how her main topic is dystopia and reproductive justice and environmentalism, which I knew I was going to use from the start because it's exactly what I wanted my paper to be. So in discussing these articles, for me personally, the research is where I found all of my answers through, just because I knew that for me specifically, whenever I do research, I attempt to answer a lot of my own questions in my head through finding research and what other people write, just so I know, like, I'm not crazy, or, that other people have the same opinions that I do. So I just wanted to discuss real quickly about my search process, which included a lot of me spending hours upon hours on JSTOR, because that's one of my favorite sites. But in terms of the article I had previously mentioned, excuse me, I used the Stockton Library website and went through in the literature section and found a lot through JSTOR and MLA International Bibliography. And I adjusted all of my preferences, full text peer review, all that fun fancy stuff. And I did want to discuss the factors that my research had on me, because I feel that it is important to discuss that. So I began my research by elevating my searches. I started, putting more stuff in. The more I could think of, the more I wanted to talk about feminist dystopia, topics about abortion, women's human rights. And just like I mentioned before, it took me in different directions. It was a lot of trial and error, I think, because I wanted to find articles that I knew were good for me and the topic I was choosing to discuss. Because like I said, it's something I'm passionate about, and I really wanted to make sure I got everything right when I was doing my paper. So through presenting those questions, I took it upon myself to do the work and the research to find the exact articles that I needed. In my process, I started to answer those questions myself and began writing all of my ideas on paper when starting my assignment. And the awareness is spread throughout the articles that these authors write. And I think that, our only hope as writers is that we can talk about this topic using our own opinions, other authors' opinions, and just spreading awareness that way. And my main focus is the importance of this topic, because I do obviously feel that motherhood versus rape is definitely a very important topic, because we do see this debate and fight through the media, through novels, through TV shows, through politics in general. The whole Roe v. Wade situation, I think, is one of the biggest factors that led me to wanting to write about this, because it's something I have been passionate about for about a year now, because I took a feminism class with Professor Van Dyne, and all we would talk about is, feminism, why the world sucks for women. And and I began, writing and reading and, trying to find answers within reading, honestly. And especially with the laws changing around women's rights, I think it is important now more than ever to talk about this, because, through my own writing and research, I feel as though the awareness is probably higher now, more than it's ever been, as getting to write and discuss this points me in the right direction. I need to hopefully find an answer and the questions that I pose to everyone. And I do, yeah. And honestly, my main last point is I just wanted to go back and discuss those questions that I posed in the beginning. I can't, sit here in front of you guys and say I have a clear answer, because I don't think I'll ever have a clear answer on these questions. I think I can only hope to continue to spread awareness about it and continue reading, continue researching, and hopefully, make myself have a bigger voice in what I write and what I do. And hopefully I can find the answers I'm looking for one day. And I think through the books that we have read this semester and all of the topics and discussions that we've had, I think I do find myself looking in a more clear direction now than I ever did before. Yes, and I just have all the sources that I have researched, and I will leave you with that.
Welcome you both to sit at the front for a brief Q&A session.
Should I leave the Zoom on like this?
Yes, you can
Okay.
leave that. In fact, I will turn the camera a little bit so that that's pretty good. Questions, comments for our first two presenters?
Sophia, my question is for you. Do you think Sarah from Red Sox is considered a bad mom? Because bad mom is your topic.
Susan, like the wife?
Yeah, Susan, not
No.
Sarah, sorry.
I do not think Susan is considered a bad mom, and I remember when we first talked about this in class, I was very passionate on the fact that she is simply a woman struggling to find her sense of self, basically raising two young children alone. Something that I don't believe she necessarily asked for, and I know I'm not a mother, but I've witnessed my own mother, and sometimes you just don't get a break. And I think she just needed a break. And I think she was villainized a lot for trying to express her feelings and her struggles without a support system.
So
I just had a related question to your question, which was, I don't know if I have it, but do any of the novels offer any glimpses of what a good mother might be outside of a dystopian framework? Like what those characteristics might be, what a goal is in a sense.
There's a scene in Red Clocks that really solidified for me the fact that Susan truly loved her children and would do anything for them. And it's when her daughter asks her if she weighs too much because her best friend was skinnier, and it really snapped her back to reality and made her think, I will not let my daughter go through this. Whether she had often compared herself to the friend's mother, raising her on organic foods. She had a support system that she did not. And she right away said, you are beautiful, you are perfect, nothing is wrong. And in that moment, you could tell she loves her kids. She would do anything for them. And she just needs help.
Actually, no, this is okay. So this is for Zophia. There's that part in Future Home of the Living God where the nurse tells Cedar that like there's antibiotics available to the women to like make their pregnancies easier. But it seems to like hurt the baby's chances, I think is how she put it. So like, what do you think it says of like Cedar's society that they're prioritizing the baby's health above the mother?
Again, I go back to the framing women as biological tools rather than people who have this ability to give life, and which is incredible. It's amazing. But it's taxing on the woman. And, in this society where evolution has gotten pretty wonky and they need all the help they can get to continue humanity, that is what they're zeroed in on. And it is just a complete disregard for humanity itself.
I have a question for Juliana, and then I have one for Sophia. So, Juliana, your presentation was focused about the rights, of mothers and all that. And when you talk about rights, do you just mean constitutional rights, like the literal sense that we kind of think of it? Do you mean metaphorical rights and representation of all different types of mothers? Do you mean self-actualization, that whole Maslow's hierarchy and identity?
I think personally, I feel like it's kind of a mixture of all of them because, we think about, the constitutional rights, we have the specifics, and then, metaphorically, I think it's all just a lot of like perception and societal judgment because, you see, I feel like we all can, kind of see that, women's place in society is not, where we want it to be. And we get judged a lot for, doing basic human things. And, I think when you add the idea of motherhood to it, I think it's always one or the other. And I don't personally think it should, you'd have to choose one or the other. I always feel like it should kind of be together, whether that be constitutional rights, metaphorically, whatever. You know what I'm saying? Because, I could talk about that all day, but I hope that kind of answers what you asked.
For sure, thank you.
Of course.
And then I have one for Zophia as well. And putting aside all the research you've done, which was very great, very extensive. Obviously being a mother, no matter what, is a big part of any person's life. Do your opinion, believe that it is possible for a woman to entirely divorce herself from the identity of motherhood, or do you think that it's, impossible?
I think.
Oh my.
That's a good question.
I think no matter how hard maybe your parents try to raise you to separate that from yourself, if they're very passionate on you don't have to have kids, you don't have to be a mother, you go out into society and people are going to put that pressure on you anyway. And I think that is unavoidable with all of the kinds of people you're exposed to. If that change can be made, it will for sure take generations. I don't think that pressure is avoidable right now, though. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, I was just gonna ask on your opinion of Margaret in Our Missing Hearts and what kind of mother you think that she is, because in the novel, it seems like she has failed as a mother according to society, but it's also kind of like her responsibility, like I guess a brought on responsibility that she has to take on this task of not only fighting for her future son's rights, but then fighting for the future of America. I just wanted to know your opinion on what type of mother she was.
I thought her and her husband had agreed that she had to leave for the safety of their son. And I mean, originally she was simply making art, and her art was taken by others for the purpose of activism, and that is essentially what caused this whole dangerous aspect of her being present at all. And of course, she feels guilty for abandoning her family, and I think that is natural to feel, but she did what they as a parental unit thought was best for their child. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I understand the guilt that she felt for sure, and it just shows how much she loved her child and how she never forgot him. And eventually those feelings overcame any artistic passions of hers. Her dying thoughts were hoping her son will just understand what she does and that it's for him.
Okay, so my question's for Zophia. So you mentioned in all these books have pretty ambiguous endings, and there's this thing called canonical interpretation, or basically how the author interprets the ending or interprets their entire story. Do you believe that we should agree with the author's interpretation, regardless of what your own opinion might be? In Future Home of the Living God, it's pretty obvious that the author is saying that no hope, bad situation, but you could believe that maybe in a year or two she somehow figures it out and gets out of there. So do you believe we should agree with author's interpretation?
I don't think we have to at all. I think Erdrich's ending in particular is that of a warning. If we keep going, then this is where we can end up. But I mean, everyone reads things different ways, and I think it's a human reaction to agree or disagree. And I mean, you see different franchises all over where people take bits and pieces and say, I think this happened to this character, and here's all my evidence. It's what we write papers on in all of our classes. We make our own ideas regardless. If this author died 50 years ago, we can't ask them anymore. So we don't really know if we're agreeing with them or not. That's just the choice of being a reader.
Yeah, I had questions for both of you. For Juliana, part of your presentation kind of discusses whether or not we should even keep fighting for these rights as women. And obviously, in an ideal world, we would try and fight for the rights of everything that's being discussed in these novels. And please forgive me, I have not read them, I'm not a literature major. But do you believe that there are certain ones that we have to realistically prioritize right now and fight over?
Ooh, that's a good question.
And if so, which ones do you think?
I mean,
really most-
I think specifically right now, the first thing that always comes to my mind is Roe v. Wade, because that's, that's the most recent that has happened. I think right now, I think that should probably be priority because it's something that was in effect for so long and was, worked so hard towards, and for it to just be taken away really quickly actually it was devastating, honestly. And I think right now we all definitely should be, wanting to fight towards, even having a fraction of that back. But I think to answer that part, I think Roe v. Wade is definitely something that we all should be prioritizing right now, because whatever happened with that and, how it went down was just awful. So I think trying to use our voice and our actions and our resources for that is definitely what is most important right now.
Thank you.
Welcome.
And Zophia, do you believe that the novels you've discussed, as well as the piece on Western philosophy, kind of establish that there's a privilege in women having a life outside of motherhood? Sure. Do the novels kind of, I guess, establish that there's a privilege to having an identity and a life outside of motherhood?
I think they do, and they also challenge that it should not be a privilege. But they definitely acknowledge that it is, it seems to be selfish, I would say, to have an identity outside of motherhood, and that's how, like, Susan, the wife of the mother, is thought to be selfish, for trying to explore this, and Margaret and Our Missing Hearts had abandoned her family. But yeah, no, I'd say they challenge that it shouldn't be a privilege at all.
Thank you.
Question for both of you. So if you were either a mother or looking to become a mother, which of these novels scares you the most?
Future Home of the Living God,
Yeah, definitely agreed.
for sure.
That's terrifying.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, terrifying.
Institutionalization.
Oh yeah. Not good.
Pills and.
Versus the aloneness of severance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'd stick with Future Home.
That's the best one.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you to clarify a little bit when you say motherhood versus rights.
Mhm.
What you mean by that? What's the tension? What's the opposition that
I
you're
think-
thinking about?
Why in my brain, like, it's odd because in my brain that's what I refer to it as, because I feel like I always see it as two separate things, which is why I feel like the versus is kind of necessary, because I feel like it's a battle in my brain. But I'm trying to explain a way to clarify it more. It's kind of like, I would say it's a struggle between being a mother and having rights, because when in these novels, they're taken away from the characters. So I kind of see it as now it's a battle between them and the society they're in, if that helps. But I think for me, it's always intertwined, even if I refer to it as, something that's, this or that, because it's just, once these characters have had all of their, basic human rights stripped away, I feel like now it's turned to a fight to try and get them back or live, now they find a new normal without their new rights, if that kind of helps it clarify a little bit.
I see that there's notifications on the chat on Zoom. We can then see if
I think they were people who had to leave, but let me think. No, thank goodness we weren't muted. Let's just look. See, singing your praises and just have to sign off. So, but I'll open, does anyone on Zoom have a question that they would like to ask? You're free to unmute yourself or put it in the chat. Okay, great, yes. So, I'll provide you both with some feedback, unless there are any other questions, we'll take a short break so that the next, presenters can set up their presentations. And help yourself to a piece of swag, mystery swag, and snacks, if you're, thank you both.
I don't understand, you get that have snacks and nobody has.
Yeah, right.
I will look and see what's on that.
That's all.
Oh, I mean, like what kind of.
It is mystery, different swag.
Okay.
Mine's already pulled up, so you can pull yours too.
I'll see. And make sure, oh yes. There's yours. Thank you.
I don't know how you say that. Is it like magnetic? Does it?
No, I wish it was. And then just hide this. Oh, okay. So we can't hide it. We'll just slide it over there so that you can.
Good crackers.
So then- Oh, good.
Rosemary crackers.
Yeah.
This one? I don't know. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think I just.
Yeah.
I don't think you're hiding them.
Just pull up over in the middle. I love
Okay.
No,
I'm gonna cry.
Let me know.
Yes, please.
About this labor of love.
Crackers and Babies and almonds. They're really good. And they have everything that's a baby. Everything that's baby.
I don't know that it's very dark.
I think I can probably do that. Just like years back.
I'll tell you what. You want to hand on?
Yeah.
I probably forget like the eyes. That's a fair day. Like having a great day. And that.
Okay, so when
you're
ready.
And if I'm gonna write.
Oh, right.
Right, yeah.
It's working tree. So it's not, knows like all these other environmental justice stuff. Has two.
Okay, so we're gonna go back to what I have set up. So we're just gonna sign into my. We're gonna do Canva on here. And it will allow you to sign everything on the back.
Yeah. We can get t-shirts. Next time.
Corporate ideology was just so good.
That's what I did.
Next semester.
Gonna probably have all.
Oh.
Wait, it might.
It's not that people want to picture, they have to do, shit.
There were, do you know English Town, the flea market?
Yeah, oh, it's missed.
Yeah. I worked in English Town in high school. My dad, it's like a student there.
Thank you.
It was fun.
She's lively.
My way to
So. Wait, are you signed in? Like, is it pulled out? Yeah.
My question.
Okay. I'm feeling the pressure,
We're
but
ready.
it's okay.
I told Juliana the same thing.
Oh, you got the classic, I think that's this Richard Stockton.
Oh, nice.
See what they're throwback.
My ID cards.
You know, the other day.
Did you minimize?
They just put stop and so stop on it.
Stop.
That's right.
Richard's dog in rest area.
I said might as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's okay. We're recording.
They have
And so
most
that
people
way.
in New Jersey
Oh,
know to stop it, know it means
We're gonna
stop.
resume unless someone would like to get some more snacks before we begin. No? Okay, all right. So our next panel is Don't Call the Repo Man, Literary Representations of Reproductive Justice.
Hello, my name is Emily. I am presenting on Future Home of the Living God and Red Clocks and how reproductive justice is represented within those. In between slides, I will give about 30 seconds so you can read the slide because I'm not reading off of the slide at all. There's no volume, Dr. J. How do I do the volume?
Let's see, check here. It's all the way up. Yeah.
So, yeah. Mhm.
Shouldn't be anything in Zoom. Can't load this audio right now.
Good to download it.
Mm-mm. It's in with the slides. Well, it's because I'm not signed in. Sorry. It should work now.
Good evening. Today I will be discussing Reproductive Justice in Red Clocks by Lenny Zumas and Future Home of the Living God by Louise Erdrich. Before I get started, I would like to give all of you my definition of what reproductive justice is. Reproductive justice can be defined as being able to choose whether or not to have children. This includes taking extra steps such as in vitro fertilization and abortion to support that choice. In my research, I came across an article written by Rebecca Tehus-DeBrow, which identifies Loretta Ross's definition of reproductive justice as the right to have a child, the right not to have children, and the right to parent the children we have. Keep these definitions in mind as we view reproductive justice in Red Clocks and Future Home of the Living God. During my research process, I noticed that there are not a lot of peer-reviewed sources for these two novels. This is because they were written relatively recently. Red Clocks by Lenny Zumas was written in 2018, and Future Home of the Living God was written in 2017. I will be contributing to the scholarly conversation by including how women and society are affected by the laws of reproductive justice. If women had more bodily autonomy, it would allow the citizens of these paratopias to have more freedom and express their choices safely. I would like to begin discussing how the novel Red Clocks is important in my argument. For those who are unfamiliar, Roe v. Wade is a court case that changed the United States Constitution
to include abortion in the privacy laws of the 14th Amendment. Roe v. Wade was overturned in 2022 in a separate court case known as Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization, also known as WHO. The Supreme Court ruled in favor of Dobbs v. Jackson WHO when they decided that the 14th Amendment shall return to its prior state of criminalizing abortion. In Red Clocks, this is represented in what they call the Personhood Amendment, which is very similar to the 14th Amendment in the U.S. Constitution. Lenny Zumas defines the laws of abortion as the Personhood Amendment, which gives the constitutional right to life, liberty, and property to a fertilized egg at the moment of conception. In the novel, a new law known as Every Child Needs Two will be taking effect January 15th. This law states that every child needs both a mother and a father. This is problematic for Maddie because she is a single mother prior to her abortion. This also causes issues for Roe because she wants to be a single mother, but she cannot get pregnant. The characters I chose to focus on from this novel are Matilda Quarles and Roberta Stevens. In the 1960s, there was a group of women known as the Jane Collective, who were dedicated to assisting other women that are in situations similar to Maddie. In the novel, Roe helps Maddie find a back alley abortion clinic known as the Polyfont Collective, which is the novel's version of the Jane Collective. Sarah Didham illustrates that before Roe v. Wade, a group of women known as the Jane Collective set themselves up as amateur abortionists, providing a reliable alternative to the unsafe and extortionate services of the back streets. While Roe is helping Maddie, she is struggling to get pregnant and become a mother herself. Roe goes through a lot of testing, including IVF and PGD treatment, that has not been successful. Erdrich even writes that it doesn't work for everyone, said Dr. Kalfleisch at their first appointment, and you're well over 40. The second novel, Future Home of the Living God, is also important in reproductive justice because it examines the pro-life movement, reproductive technologies, and racial discrimination. The pro-life movement can be separated into the extreme position and the moderate position. When someone is in the extreme pro-life position, they do not believe that there should be any exceptions to allow abortion to occur. However, the moderate position takes in consideration abortion when consent is questioned in rape cases. In order to be able to take a more moderate approach to the pro-life movement, one would have to consider the flaws within the movement and improve upon them. Bruce Blackshaw points out that the pro-life position is a clash between the fetus's right to life and a woman's right to her bodily autonomy. In this novel, a Native American woman named Cedar Hawk Songmaker is pregnant with her boyfriend Phil's baby. Cedar is adopted by a white family, and this causes her to worry about unknown genetic issues her baby may carry. Anna Kemble tells readers that Cedar is concerned exclusively with the genetic information rather than native culture that the baby might inherit from their bio-based grandparents. Kemble also writes that the processes of racialization and racial discrimination are less overt than the imprisonment of pregnant women or conscription of womb volunteers. Yet fragments of information documented within Cedar's diary suggests that white superiority is reinforced during this crisis. When Cedar is at a prenatal appointment in the holding facility, she meets with a doctor. Luis Erdrich writes that he asks Cedar about the father. Is he white? And Phil is indeed white. Reproductive justice is important to me because I want my daughter and I to be able to have control over our own bodies. I want to be able to make choices for myself in the future. Pregnancy is a wonderful thing to experience. However, I had a horrible experience being pregnant, and I don't know if I want another child in the future. If I were to become pregnant again, I would like to make the choice when that time comes, whether I want to continue that pregnancy or not. The pictures you see here are images of all the important women in my life, including my younger self, my grandmother, my mother, my aunt, my daughter, and my younger cousin. It is these women that have been my motivation in writing this paper, and they have been so encouraging in the entire process. I am extremely grateful for them, and this is where my passion stems. Here is my works cited page. Here you will find all of the sources for all of the quotations I have used within my presentation today. Here on this. The audio is not really important for this one, it's just the image citations for where I found the pictures within. That is it. Thank you. I just want to say really quick that I was very passionate and emotional, which is why I couldn't really speak it today, so I recorded it, because I would have ended up crying. Thank you.
Maybe it's just me. Is there a mouse question mark? You're so right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And don't forget to click the share screen.
It's already shared.
Oh, it is? Okay, thank you.
Okay, so my topic that I decided to do for my senior seminar project is titled "This Ain't That: The Miseducation of Abortions and their importance in treating miscarriages." So, as we know, the concept of abortions is a topic of controversy, especially today. With the current overturning of Roe versus Wade, millions of women across the U.S. have not only lost access to medical treatment for abortions, but they will be criminalized due to these regulations. And as I said before in this presentation, I wish to stress the importance of abortion treatment when it comes to miscarriage. So, I would like to express the differences between both of them because there are differences. With an abortion, it can also be named as an induced abortion. It's the voluntary termination of a fetus, usually before the 13-week gestational age. With a miscarriage, according to the Krause Family Foundation, pregnancy loss or miscarriage can be defined as the spontaneous loss of a non-viable I have trouble pronouncing this word. Yes, sorry. Pregnancy before 20 weeks gestational age. And that basically means that the child's growth in the uterus has ceased before they can reach 20 weeks. I felt like it was important to kind of explain the distinction between the two because historically medical professionals were unsure how to assess miscarriages And since the technology was not yet developed at the time, it was often ruled out as an abortion. As a result, there are still kind of misconceptions about the true terms today, and the fact that they still persist pose a huge problem for the rights of the safety of women. So, if you didn't know, treatment for abortions and miscarriages are inherently the same. And with one of the methods, or the most common method, would be mifepristone followed by misoprostol. Both of them work in conjunction with each other. You can take mifepristone individually. However, it will not be as effective if you took the two pills together. And what those two pills do is it detaches the fecal matter, or the fetal matter, excuse me, the fetal matter from the lining of the uterus and causes the cervix to contract. These two pills can be taken orally or vaginally, and you can also have an abortion by vacuum aspiration, which is where they take a suction tool into the cervix and detach the fetal matter in that way. So the treatment for abortions are 93 to 98% effective, and these medications are actually 14 times safer than continuing a pregnancy to term. And they don't often pose any long-term health risks. And to mifepristone, there aren't any side effects, but with misoprostol, there are. They don't really last that long. They last maximum like 24 hours, and they include severe cramps, vaginal bleeding, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, fever. And in very rare cases, which is like 0.9%, patients can be prone to bacterial infections. But again, very low. So these medications have been used over 20 years, with the most recent update in 2016. But they are not available to everyone in the US. In Canada, the medication mifepristone is available in pharmacies, but in the US it is not. And that is due to the risk evaluation and mitigation strategy. And what this strategy basically is that it requires that these specific medications be registered through the drug manufacturer's central database, and that clinicians must order, store, and dispense this medication at their discretion. So it is not available in pharmacies where women will be able to equally access it. And because of the tight regulations, women who live in like rural areas are not able to just drive to their local pharmacy. They would probably have to drive like 2 hours out to be able to access it. This alone would discourage women from seeking treatment, as it would cost them a considerable amount of money and time. And what's more is that clinicians themselves rarely prescribe, educate, or refer women who are seeking abortion services, and they are left uneducated and untreated by clinicians. So I just wanted to give some background on some abortion regulations as of currently. As of right now, 43 states prohibit some abortions after a certain point of pregnancy. 14 states ban abortion period. 2 states ban abortions at 6 weeks at your last menstrual period. 2 states ban abortions at 12 weeks. 2 states ban abortions at 15 weeks. 1 state bans abortion at 18 weeks. 4 states ban abortion at 22 weeks. 4 states ban abortion at 24 weeks. 12 states impose a ban at viability, etc., etc. So I just wanted to kind of highlight some headlines that have been in the media. As of currently, as you can see from each, I know they're kind of tiny, everyone, I apologize for that. But the dates underneath, so the first one is they had miscarriages and new abortion laws, and the current date on that is July 17, 2022. Second one also 2022, and the following either 2022 or this year. I wanted to kind of highlight these slides because I wanted to show that the emotional side to kind of women who haven't received care or adequate care for their miscarriage. not only is this like a statistical problem, women's lives are inherently like changed after not receiving care. Women who don't receive adequate care can get sepsis, which, if you don't know, is like a blood disease that could result in death. As you can see, one of the headlines is a woman almost dies, and there's another one that says a woman bleeds profusely from not having miscarriages, from not having treatment for her miscarriage. So I just wanted to highlight those as well, because it is a huge impact that it has on our society. So I just wanted to give background. There's actually a really extensive background on this, especially when it comes to the documentation of abortion and miscarriages. So of course, miscarriage and abortion has been occurring, for centuries, but it wasn't really until the 20th century in Great Britain specifically that the medical community had started to develop understandings about these two terms. So within the medical field at this time, there were no concrete definitions for either abortions nor miscarriages. So medical professionals often had their own working definitions of what each term meant, but the common factor between all of the definitions was the fact that they meant the same thing. In early medicinal dictionaries and encyclopedias, a definition of abortions would often refer to miscarriages. So it would give the definition and then it would say see miscarriage and vice versa. And then in medical journals and articles, these terms would be used interchangeably. So these misconceptions were largely due to the lack of technology, for example, ultrasounds, as I've said before, to investigate the causes of pregnancy loss and influences within the medical community also contributed to these misconceptions. So uncertainty around these definitions wouldn't shift until about the end of the century, which I would give it, if I could give it a time frame, like 1970s to almost 2000, and it would evoke discourse within politics and society. So the medical field was ultimately shifted by the publications of abortions and miscarriages in the beginning of the 20th century. So previous to this time period, physicians at the time didn't really explicitly converse about abortion treatment with their patients because there was a so-called conspiracy of silence that allowed them to be able to do these procedures, mainly because they were afraid of public opinion, especially from men, if they found out, their wives were getting abortions without their consent. At the same time, though, it was also acceptable to receive these procedures, especially if their family fell under the working class, because it was very expensive to raise a child. I guess some things never changed, so that was one of the reasons why. And the knowledge about abortions that became publicized were believed to consist of negative outcomes, especially from the medical community. They believed that a lot of their procedures that went wrong would be publicized, and they would consist of botch-induced abortions. And as a result, many women were criminalized first in society once this news did get out, and then the medical community for even allowing those abortions to exist. So that eventually led to not the banning, but the restrictions on reproductive laws. So medical professionals would criminalize women for either a miscarriage or an abortion based on the following criteria. This criteria includes abrasions or signs of tampering within the cervical or vaginal wall. If they found any lacerations, there was evidence you kind of tried to give yourself a homemade abortion, they would kind of say, hey, I'm going to report you. Any signs of fever. So if you had a fever over a certain amount, I believe it was 101 degrees Fahrenheit, they would criminalize you. They will also criminalize you for septic uterine discharge. So even if your discharge was a bit off to the doctor, they would criminalize you. The patient's tone of voice, if you seem nervous or so-called in denial about you getting an abortion, you could be accused of giving yourself, causing yourself bodily harm to you or the baby, or simply because the doctor said so. So the criminalization of women also ultimately resulted in women refusing to seek out treatment for their miscarriages in fear of being penalized, and women seeking non-medical methods of inducing abortions. These beliefs and definitions were used, as I said before, up until the end of the 20th century when academic journals began distinguishing the definitions between the two terms. Specifically, still in Great Britain, the two academic journals that began distinguishing these two definitions were the BMJ, which is the British Journal of Medicine, and Lancelot. And the Abortion Act of 1967 also influenced medical professionals to consider the differences between the two terms as well. So today, there are currently 38 states that have fetal homicide laws. These laws usually apply to those who enact a physical harm to the babies and themselves. However, in cases of exceptions like rape or incest, unfortunately, these women can still be penalized for that. So as a result, millions of women have not only struggled to find treatment in other states, but many have also sought non-medical forms of treatment and have suffered serious health problems, as I said before, such as infection or sepsis. From not receiving care in response to this, women and feminists have been challenging these laws and debunking claims when it comes to fetal personhood, especially when it comes to exceptional cases. So in conclusion, completely eliminating abortion treatment would not only affect the lives of women who are seeking an abortion, but it would also affect those seeking treatment for a miscarriage, which can also further increase maternal mortality and could encourage women to seek out non-medical methods. Unfortunately, the possibility of a future where all abortions are banned is very likely, even though I would not like that very much, especially as a Black woman, because we all can attest to, or some of us can attest to, kind of how different it is for each woman, especially different demographics. And if that were to occur, the socio-political climate of the nation and the entire world would be tilted on its axis. And then I also feel that these laws could threaten the quality of life for all human beings and can bring us closer to a society that is not only dystopian, but as many of you have included in your presentations as well, paratopian. And that is it for me.
Invite our two presenters to questions, comments for Autumn and Emily?
Yeah, I have a question for Emily. I wanted to know, so at the end of your presentation, you said you had a very emotional connection with it while you were doing it. I wanted, in your comfort, of course, I wanted to know, your emotional attachment and, what doing this as a mom is like for you, because it's obviously different for all of us, because, not most of us are not. So I just want to know, like, what it was like for you doing, your research and presentation as a mom.
So this entire class has actually been very eye-opening because I was the only mother within the class. And this research really, honestly, it made me angry because I have a daughter. So it's not just like I have a son and his rights are at stake, because they're not. I have a daughter, so her future is at risk. And doing this research made me want to dig into it more because of my daughter, because I want her to have rights. And, pregnancy can be accidents, And if I were to get pregnant by accident, I'm not ready to have another child right now. I'm chasing after a 2-year-old and barely keeping my head on straight. Now, I personally don't believe in abortion, so I wouldn't get an abortion, but I would like that choice to be there if I changed my mind. Because that might be my belief right now, but if I were to be pregnant tomorrow and not like knowing I'm not ready for a child, my mind might change because of the perspective. So it was very difficult and it really made me angry and emotional, which is why I didn't verbally present like the rest of us today, because I would have cried. And it would not have been like anxious tears, it would have been like, I'm angry tears. And I included personal pictures at the end of my presentation of all of the women who have been affected by Roe v. Wade being overturned. My aunt miscarried literally like a month before Roe v. Wade was overturned. And I'm grateful that she miscarried then instead of now, because I don't know what dangers she would be at risk now. And it's affected my entire family in different ways. So.
Emily, which mother did you relate to the most in the novels we read, or which the least, or just none at all?
That's a really hard question to answer. I think I related the most to Susan from Red Clocks, because as Zophia mentioned in her presentation, moms just need a break. My break isn't really considered a break because I'm here learning and I'm at school. I literally go from kid to school, back to kid. So there's not really a real break, but I enjoy learning and I enjoy coming to this class. So it's more of a break than I would get otherwise.
For Emily, since you also researched Future Home of the Living God, do you think the excessive reproductive technology displayed through these institutions for these pregnant women kind of comments on the withholding of reproductive care in terms of like miscarriages and abortions in like modern day society?
I don't really know how to answer that because, like, yes, I do, but I also don't. Like, I'm kind of in the middle. It's a huge gray area. It's the reproductive rights in general are not black and white. Because if they were, wouldn't be reproductive rights. They would just be human rights. And that definitely dips into the equality of the human race that does not exist. So I don't really know how to answer that question. I'm sorry.
No. Yeah. Just like before, I have 2 questions, one for Autumn and one for Emily. Autumn, you had such an important and detailed work. So what was your inspiration behind this whole project?
If we're being so honest, my inspiration, because I did not know what I wanted to do up until this day. When we went to Constitution Day, I remember the speaker mentioning that the treatment for abortions and miscarriages were the same, and that if you did not have access to that when you were having a miscarriage, you could get sepsis. And then a light bulb went off. I was like, that's really important. My mom herself had 2 miscarriages, but it was like 10-ish years ago. So I felt that was really important on a personal level. She did kind of mourn the loss of the babies. But she was able to, kind of get through it. She still had at that time about 2 or 3 young ones. So I felt that I could be able to kind of like hone in on that and write about that. So
Awesome, thank you. And then I have a question for Emily as well. So in the beginning of your presentation, I believe you mentioned pointing out the potential flaws in both the pro-life movement and also the pro-choice movement. and kind of the dichotomy between the two. So we've kind of heard you talk about the issues and the flaws within the pro-life movement, but based off of the books that we've read, or the ones that you focus on, and the articles that you researched, and all your research as a whole, do you believe that any of them point out potential flaws? And if so, what were they? Or do you believe that they didn't point those out?
So the main flaw that I saw within my research was with rape. How extreme pro-life position people, they look at it as abortion is an absolute no, regardless of any situation at all. And the more moderate approach will consider abortion if it's not consensual. And in, I think it was Future Home of the Living God, there was a part where one of the women that Cedar was in the facility with was saying how her pregnancy was not her choice. And I think that in that case, that would be a flaw in the pro-life movement. And in my personal opinion, I think a flaw in the pro-choice movement is that if you are 100% pro-choice, you think everybody should have a choice, but you don't consider your own perspective. Like me personally, yeah, I'm pro-choice for everybody, but I would never get an abortion. So people don't really consider their own perspective when thinking of the pro-choice movement. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Jacob, I think you would, and then.
Questions for both of you. Yeah. I was supposed to be aborted. Yeah. My question here is, what advice would you give younger women, right, and yourself, advice in like those who are considering abortion? What kind of advice would you offer?
You wanna go first?
I'm still
You
developing.
want to think about it?
Yeah.
Okay. The advice I would give them is you have to be mentally prepared to have a child. And if you don't think you are mentally prepared for it, then do what is best for you, because you cannot take care of yourself. No, let me rephrase that. You cannot take care of another human being until you take care of yourself first. And I've learned that firsthand with my daughter.
I would say same thing. Also, if we're talking about someone who's going through who's adolescent, who's going through puberty, I would probably,
Like Maggie.
yeah, I would kind of introduce contraceptives, the idea of contraceptives and safe sex to them first, especially if they weren't ready, because I feel like a lot of people gloss over that when talking about women's reproductive rights. The fact that, you can be with this person and then not have safe relations with them, and then you end up pregnant, and that right there, it's not a guarantee that it'll prevent you from getting pregnant, but it's a preventative. So I would definitely stress that to them. I'd also stress the impact that both decisions, whether you decide to keep the baby or not, are both very important decisions. And there are many factors in making those decisions. So whichever one they choose, they have to be prepared to be able to take on the responsibilities of either.
These are both really interesting and thoughtful papers and topics, and I have so many things I want to ask you about. I'm trying to see if I can frame it into one question that maybe either of you can ask, but I'm really a very big proponent of the reproductive justice framework, as opposed to the pro-choice framework. And I think that there's a sense in the pro-choice framework, there is a focus on bodily autonomy and individual rights. Whereas the reproductive justice framework focuses more on social justice and human rights. So not just whether or not you want to have a child, but if you choose to be a parent, whether the social structures that would enable you to do that, housing, food, education, access to medical care, all of the sort of aspects of society that would make raising a child viable, right, are in place. And so I'm wondering if you think that in terms of this issue, if focusing less on rights, I know you were talking about rights a lot, but focusing less on individual rights, so it's the fetus's right versus your right, the mother's right versus the father's right, and focusing more on really creating a culture where people who want to have children can do so with full support, and people who don't want to have children can do so without stigma, would be more viable. And if any of the books you read for this class point in one of those directions or another. I know that was a lot of a question.
It's okay, I have an answer.
Okay.
Did you want to go first? Or you want to think, or?
Is it okay? I feel like I'll lose it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. First of all, great question. In the beginning of that question, I know you were mentioning it's less of like a sort of political issue or a social or legal issue and more like a humanitarian issue. That is the very thing I've been stressing for years. In fact, in my final paper, I'm writing a series of 10 poems and then an artist statement. My first poem is about politics, and it expresses how a lot of issues that are deemed legal and political within our society are just humanitarian issues. They are not in any sense political, and they use the humanitarian aspects of it and the definition of politics interchangeably. And I explicitly express that in my first poem. So I do agree. To answer your question at the end about just kind of our stance, I agree. I feel like there should be some sort of support where people who want to have children should be able to live in those conditions where they can have children, and people who don't should be able to be supported. Nonetheless, I myself right now do not want children for many reasons. One of them being very selfish. But another is because I am a Black woman in this society. The maternal mortality rate for Black women in this society is 3 to 4 times more than my white counterpart. So I could end up dying during childbirth because the doctors will say, hey, she's a Black woman, she can take more pain than the average woman. There are also other complications as well. They could ignore me in the hospital whenever I say I'm in pain. So that really scares me. And I feel that, as you know, my choice should be respected. My parents are like, oh, you might change your mind. My family members are like, oh, you might change your mind. But as of right now, I can barely take care of myself, let alone a little one running around. So yes, I agree.
Wow. I love your question. And I'm gonna take it like from my personal experience as a mother. I think right now the focus should be on our legal rights to be able to have an abortion. I come from a very, I don't want to say poor because I'm not poor, but I'm not in the, like, I'm lower middle class. And we definitely do not have all of the money that we need to raise a child. And I didn't know that when I got pregnant. I thought it would have been easier and cheaper. But when I had my daughter, I was pleasantly surprised at all of the resources that are out there for new mothers. For example, health insurance that you mentioned in your question, is guaranteed for any child under the age of 5. They will have their own health insurance if the mother or father cannot provide one for them. As well as for the entire first year of my daughter's life, I didn't have to pay a cent for her. WIC, which is Women's, Infants, and Children, covered all of her formula and all of her expenses that wise, and family, friends, and also WIC and her pediatrician helped out with diapers, wipes, and all of those necessities. So I was very pleasantly surprised with all of the support I was met with. And it's not just like the food and health insurance and stuff. I was offered applications for Section 8 housing when I was in the hospital giving birth. Thankfully, I did not need it. I still applied for it because, you know, in a couple of years when there's housing available, I may need it. But right now I don't. I'm fortunate enough to live with my mom and my husband. And there's a lot of resources and support out there that I don't think many people know about because they're not experiencing it themselves in the moment. So I think the focus right now is trying to get our rights back that were just taken away from us, rather than finding resources that are there, they're just not plentiful.
Can I add one more thing? I just want to say personally, your personal response hit me too. I mean, I can really feel you're feeling both of you, like, and I think that for your generation, right, too, there's, you know, a lot of millennials and Gen Z who are really unsure about whether or not they can be mothers, or whether, you know, that's something that not whether even they want to or not, but whether like it's going to be possible. So I love both of your answers because they really showed that there are real obstacles and real social issues, and also that there is some support there. That's really important. I also want to say, so I'm a mother, right, who had an abortion when I was 19, had a baby when I was 34, had another abortion when my son was 2 years old. And I don't feel bad about it. And I just want to say that in a context where people don't talk about it, because for me, it was the right thing to do. My mother took me to have the first abortion. My husband was with me for the second one. And my son is happy, healthy, and thriving, thank God, and, you know, universe, but we should talk about it.
Good for you. I don't know anybody outside of my personal family who will openly speak about them having an abortion. So thank you for sharing that.
Any other questions for our? I was thinking too, that part of your question, I think, is also, Mary, was in your paper in terms of looking at the child and the representation of the child. And so we'll definitely get that other sort of side of the reproductive justice equation in Wednesday's presentation. So if you can join us again on Wednesday, either on Zoom or here in the classroom, we'd love to see you. And thank you. If you want to hang out for a little bit and mingle, have some snacks. I was back with me. I'd love to chat with you all informally. Thanks again for coming. Thank you for coming.
Oh, I wanted to tell people about a book. There's an amazing book by Anna Matthews. So if you or someone you love